Okay.
It'll be awesome. We will talk more Guardians off the top of our WKYC show coming up here in half an hour. Make sure you guys tune in. But right now, we are thrilled to welcome in Matt Miller, ESPN draft expert, analyst, guru of all things NFL draft to the show. Matt, appreciate you taking some time to hang out with us today.
Yeah, of course. Appreciate you guys having me on. Thank you.
Matt, are you I don't know why I think you're a Royals fan. Am I making that up, or is that true?
I am. No, you're absolutely right. That's how long we've known each other. You
Okay.
need to know which bad baseball team I'm a fan of.
So, Matt, how would you have voted in the recently rejected referendum to spend some money for the Royals and the Chiefs to upgrade and build new stadiums?
Yeah, so I don't live in that area, so I wasn't able to vote, but I'm a little bit south of there. I would have voted no.
Interesting.
I'm not a believer in giving the Chiefs money to add premium luxury suites that only the top 1% can afford.
Good for you.
Via tax money. I'm just not, and
No.
I understand. I've been very fortunate in life to I can afford some things I wasn't able to when I was younger. I don't know why we expect the working class people of that county to pay for rich people to have more suites at a football game. I'm not on board with that.
No, Matt, the only reason I ask is because here in Cleveland, obviously, the Haslams want a new stadium. They're talking dome. They're talking moving it out of Cleveland to Brook Park, 15 minutes away, whatever. But there's a lot of talk that whatever happens, public money is going to be used. And I believe with you, most of the residents that live in Cleveland, the third most impoverished city in the country, can't afford one ticket to a home game.
Yeah.
And you're going to ask them and put the building of a new stadium on their backs to only supplement the income and the pocketbook of a billionaire who I guess was recently named one of the top 5 richest owners in the NFL. It
crazy.
Makes no sense to me.
It's crazy.
And
yeah, I'm with you.
I know Phoenix recently also rejected a proposal, a referendum to build a new stadium for the hockey team, and I hope that that's a trend.
Yeah. Well, if all the cities do it together, we'll be all right.
That's exactly right, yeah.
Matt, let's get to some football here because that's your expertise. Of course, you did a 7-round mock draft, which is kind of insane to do a 7-round mock draft, but I love that you do it. And we need it because the Browns haven't had a first-round pick in forever.
A while.
Right?
Yeah.
It was funny because for years in the 2010s, it seemed like the Browns would have multiple first-round picks every year. Now they've had none for a bunch of years. So the Browns will pick for the first time in the 50s. We're all thinking maybe they'll draft a wide receiver, maybe they'll draft a linebacker or defensive lineman. I don't know. What do you think makes the most sense for the Browns when they pick, assuming they stay there at 54 or whatever it is?
Yeah, I think defense makes the most sense in my opinion, especially after trading for Jeudy. And really, this offense looks great. It truly does. You've filled a lot of positions. I even think a low-key good signing was getting Donta Foreman to be a second or third running back. That was another area I thought, hey, maybe some depth at running back. I really like the way that room looks right now. So I do think defense is an area where, we've seen some additions at linebacker. A backup defensive tackle comes in. So I honestly think you can maybe just sit there and say, who's the best defender on the board? In that 7-round mock draft, I had them grabbing Devondre Sweat, the massive nose tackle out of Texas, kind of with the idea of BPA on defense, but also there's a part of me that just wants to see Myles Garrett get more one-on-ones because you have this 366-pound Outland Trophy award-winning defensive tackle really messing things up in the middle of that line. And so people who haven't watched Sweat, I would encourage you to find the YouTube highlights if you can. He is very, very disruptive despite his size. A lot of people are going to see that and say, oh, he's just a nose tackle. He can absolutely collapse the pocket, and we know how much interior pressure is going to help what I think is the best defensive end in football, Myles Garrett, coming off the edge.
Matt, they talk about the quarterback position, and this year is no different. You always seem to be 2 or 3 quarterbacks that are, coveted, taking a little bit higher than they should. I've seen mock drafts where there's as high as 6 quarterbacks going in the first round. Do you think that's a bit much? And what is your prediction on, how many quarterbacks will ultimately be taken in the first round?
Yeah, that's the kind of hard/fun part of this job is you evaluate players, you put a grade on them, and then you see how many get overdrafted. And I think for quarterback, it is a trend of guys being overdrafted. We can go back to Mac Jones being selected at number 15 overall. Now, that was way higher than most people had him rated. I had Daniel Jones with a 3rd-round grade. The Giants took him in the top 10. So I do think this year, the number I feel comfortable with is 4. We're going to Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, J.J. McCarthy. 5, maybe Bo Nix or Michael Penix Jr. slide in there. Personally, I don't think we will see 6. That is a lot of quarterbacks. And even this year, we saw how much movement there was on the backup quarterback market or on the bridge quarterback market. That did fill a lot of needs for teams, even like the Raiders bringing in Gardner Minshew. And I know Gardner's not a Hall of Famer, but he's a quality bridge starter. So a team like the Raiders, you would say, yeah, they have a need at quarterback, but they have Aiden O'Connell, they have Gardner Minshew. Do you really throw them into the mix in the first round? Personally, I don't, but we could certainly see 5 go.
Matt, one of the big debates is who goes first at wide receiver. For most, it was a foregone conclusion all year that it was going to be Marvin Harrison Jr. But there's been a lot of talk, and I don't know how realistic it is, that he ends up going to the kid from LSU. Who's going to be the biggest impact receiver here? And I'm not saying who's going to go first. You can tell us that, but who do you think is going to have the better NFL career?
Yeah, I would still take Harrison Jr. as the guy who goes first and who has the better NFL career. So much of that question is, based on where they go, the situation. And that's the fun part. You can watch these guys get drafted by a scheme or, that have a certain quarterback and say, oh, man, I would love to flip my rankings almost, because now that we see the fit, we understand how much better it's going to work out for that player. But I do think Marvin is just almost being over-evaluated at this point. I think there's some paralysis by analysis going on because we've known for so long how great he was going to be. But, the route running ability, the hands, the speed that he has at his size still makes him a rare prospect. I think oftentimes in this business, we get excited about shiny new toys. Malik Neighbors kind of came out of nowhere this year, so there's a lot of excitement about him. But I think, when you're trying to make that decision in 3 weeks of who's coming off the board as the first wide receiver, whether that be the Cardinals, the Chargers, the Giants, somewhere in that 4, 5, 6 range, it would be very hard for me to say no to the pedigree of Marvin Harrison Jr., the production that he had at Ohio State. And something gets lost, guys. He went from C.J. Stroud with Jackson Smith and Jigba opposite him. Those guys are gone. Everyone in the world knows who's getting the football at Ohio State now. You have an uneven quarterback in Kyle McCord. He only had 10 fewer receptions for like 100 fewer yards and the exact same number of touchdowns, despite everyone knowing where the ball was going game after game after game. So his ability to produce without those legends around him tells me that this dude is absolutely ready to be a number 1 receiver in the NFL.
Great
Matt,
point.
Usually in the history of the NFL, tight ends take time to develop offensively. Last year, we saw Sam Laporta, probably the best rookie season I can ever remember, at least statistically for a tight end, from a fantasy perspective. I'm not looking at the blocking and stuff like that. And even Dalton Kincaid had a really good year as a rookie, not quite as good as Laporta, but really good. Does that affect where Brock Bowers, you think he moves up because teams now will be a little more aggressive at that position?
Yeah, that very much so. I do think that could get him to 10 with the Jets. It could get him to 15 with the Colts is probably his floor. You're right. When I started in this business, tight ends was like a project. You never saw those guys come in and play right away. That has changed. We could even look back at Kyle Pitts had 1,000 yards his rookie year before they forgot how to throw the ball in Atlanta.
Right.
So there are other guys who they've had a great immediate success. I think what makes Brock unique is he's not this physical outlier like a Kyle Pitts. He is 6'3", barely, 240 pounds. He's not a 4'4" guy. He's just a really, really good football player. More in that Sam Laporta mold. Laporta was, picked in the 30s. So I think that'll be the question of how early do you draft not just a tight end, but a tight end who doesn't have physical outlier attributes. And we haven't seen a workout from Brock Bowers. That's another part of this because he had the ankle injury this season. We haven't seen him run a 40-yard dash. We haven't seen him do a lot of the athletic testing that you would like to see in order to compare him to some of these guys. But I do think, if we're just talking who are the 5 best football players in this class, he's probably on that list. So I do think 10 to 15 is where we see him come off the board.
I'm all into Operation Stockpile. You may not have heard of it. It's swept the nation. The Cleveland Browns are stockpiling people. They even stockpile quarterbacks and coaches now. I'm looking to get another receiver. Which one of these guys do you think will be available at 54 between Xavier Legette, Pearsall or from Florida, Troy Franklin, or Ladd McConkey? Which one of those guys could potentially be on the board at 54?
I would say of those 4, your best bet is for Ricky Pearsall and Troy Franklin. Franklin is really an interesting prospect. He's a skinnier guy who is a vertical stretch player, but he tested pretty poor in terms of acceleration and burst. So I think that's pushing him down a little bit. I actually have like an early round 3 grade on Franklin. He's a very narrow framed guy, kind of tight hipped, but when he gets loose deep, good luck stopping him. So I think if you find a specific role for him, and the Browns have, some great wide receivers, you could do that. You could put him into a specific role. Ricky Pearsall, I have moved up since the Senior Bowl, since the Combine. I feel like every time I watch him, I move him up a little bit. I think he's right there in that range that you're talking about, middle of round 2. And he is, guy who attacks the ball really, really well in the red zone. He does have that, I think, a little more first step twitch than Troy Franklin does. Maybe doesn't have quite the build-up speed, but really, really great short area quickness and burst.
Matt, let's talk about the current Brown receivers. We know Amari Cooper, we don't need to talk about him. We know how good he is. But obviously the acquisition of Jerry Jeudy. The guy had a ton of potential, first-round pick. He hasn't lived up to that potential. He hasn't been terrible, but he's just been kind of a guy. What are your expectations for him? What did you think of him coming out? And how high is his upside still in year 5, his first year with the Browns?
Yeah, I really liked him coming out. I don't have it in front of me, but he was one of my top receivers in a really, really good receiver class that year. I thought he was someone that would be, this fantastic breaking route runner, because that was what he was so good at Alabama. There were focus drops in college that would kind of frustrate you a little bit, but he always bounced back from that, which was encouraging. I think it was the LSU game. He drops one in the end zone, next play scores a touchdown. So you saw kind of that ability to battle some adversity. It just didn't work out in Denver. I think some of that was, he never had a consistent quarterback getting him the ball. He was never, quote unquote, the guy there. I think that's a big adjustment for players coming from college to the NFL, is you go from being the dude at Alabama on a loaded team to being a second or third option in the NFL. That's a little bit tougher, but I love the low risk investment here. And I think playing opposite someone, Amari Cooper, also a Bama alum, he can kind of, put Jerry under his wing a little bit and show him the ropes of how to be a professional. But, there were times when Jerry would absolutely look like that number 1 wideout. It was just a little bit inconsistent in Denver, which is why he's available. But I like it here because he doesn't have to be the focal point of the offense. You have Coop, you have Njoku. Like there's Moore is a really good receiver as well. So he could come in and be maybe that secondary option, which I think is best for where he's at in his career right now.
Matt, I know you said you think 5 quarterbacks go off the board in round 1, not 6. And Caleb Williams gets all the press, and he's the guy that everybody say is going to be the first off the board. What is your degree of confidence, 0 to 100, that he is going to be the best quarterback long-term that comes out of this draft?
I would say pretty high, 80%, 85%.
Wow.
And again, so much depends on fit. We could see Drake May go to the Vikings, where you have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and 2 really good offensive tackles. And that's a great fit for a rookie quarterback. But I think with Caleb, the reason I am so confident is he has the most unique skill set of, he's a great thrower, wonderful arm strength, really, really good field vision. He's also a great runner. We saw that 14 rushing touchdowns the last 2 years. He's a great runner. And that to me just is exactly where the NFL is going. And let's not sleep on what the Bears have done, building out this offense. They've done a really nice job of adding, number 1 weapons for him in the pass game, building up the offensive line. They've got 2 really good tight ends. They've got a deep running back room. So I think Chicago is, we'll see what this looks like because it is very, very much new. But I think this is a better landing spot than it would have been a year ago for a quarterback, certainly. But I'm a big, big believer in Caleb Williams, who, like Marvin Harrison Jr., is 1,000% being over-evaluated. And I think a lot of words are being put in his mouth, that have given people a perception of him that's not accurate with who he actually is as a player or as a person.
Yeah, draft propaganda. It's
Thanks, Matt.
crazy.
Yeah, it's the time
Matt,
of year.
I know you got to go. Thanks a lot. We appreciate it,
man.
Yep, thanks so much, guys.